Part 49. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 487. 5 colored stems grow on the Buddha's soil. 1 flower and 1 world, 1 leaf, and 1 Tathagata. In fact, there are great secrets in any matter, no matter how subtle it is. Just as after the invention of the microscope, human beings' understanding of the world has once again improved to a greater level, but in reality this is still rare. This world has too many secrets and too many unknowns. Just like the scientific giants who made extraordinary achievements in their respective fields, they turned to the embrace of theology, such as Newton and others. If we look at the problem from a dialectical perspective, we now think that the ancients were feudal and superstitious. We think that we are scientific and advanced. However, when people in the future look at us now, they may also think that we are feudal is superstitious. Just like the question that Subai has been thinking about, that is, he was obviously just a newborn baby at that time, and the picture he saw should be the representation of his own memory, just like the gods imagined by ancient people. The gods' personalities and behavior styles are very similar to those of the people at that time. No matter how rich the human spiritual world is, it is actually only a projection of what we see in the real world. If it is said that in the Last Punishment story world, the broadcaster deliberately created such an illusion for himself, which is false, then what happened to the scene he just saw again? This was obviously what happened after the illusion was broadcast to me. If these memory scenes are true, then where do these memories of mine come from? Who was it that helped me record the memory of that time? Who is it that suddenly transmitted the memory of that time to himself at this time? Bada. That drop of blood from a vampire more than 2,000 years ago bloomed on Subai's skin. Ying felt that the cold aura on Subai's body increased suddenly, and her hands were almost numb from the cold. She immediately stepped back several steps, looking at everything in front of her with confusion and fear. What happened to him? Does all this have anything to do with me? If he has an accident, is he also responsible? From the bottom of her heart, Ying didn't want to see anything unexpected happen to Subai. She had also said before that although she and Subai were not lovers and there was no so-called love at first sight, the two of them could still be considered comparable. They were good friends, at least they felt quite relaxed when they were together, so Ying didn't want anything to happen to Subai, at least not in front of her. However, the situation at this time was no longer under Ying's control. She could only sit here in a daze, looking at everything in front of her. Moreover, she also knew that even calling 120 would be of no use. Ying picked up the glass of wine next to her and drank it in one gulp. A little tipsy, he sat on the carpet. At this time, Subai's bed began to freeze, and ice scum started to form. Blood, for the vampire clan, is not only the life that ordinary people refer to, blood is the glory of the vampire clan, the dignity of the vampire clan, and the belief of the vampire clan. As for blood, the real ability, in fact, even the vampires themselves are rarely known. Nowadays, it is not that there are no vampires in the real world, but those vampires are hidden in a corner of Western Europe, and no one knows about them. Dare to let people know. Although they still exist, although they still have inheritance, it is as if they have been castrated, leaving only one breath for the race to survive. In fact, blood contains too many secrets. For example, Subai can see ancestors' memory from that drop of blood, and he can see the vastness of the past 2,000 years ago from the vampires in the research institute. These are actually not stored in their souls, but in their memories. Just as human scientists have only discovered in recent years that people not only breathe through their mouth and nose, but also through the pores of their whole body. In fact, human blood is more like recording bits and pieces of information. Storage device, but only the vampires have the ability to develop the power in the blood. But now, perhaps because of Subai's accumulation, or because of the stimulation and hypnosis from Ying, Subai began to dig deep into his own blood without knowing it. This marks Subai's a further sublimation of the use of vampire power. There is even a possibility that the further integration of the zombie bloodline and the vampire bloodline has stimulated this. In short, all of this has an inexplicable but reasonable coincidence. If Subai hadn't gone looking for it, the two little boys compared each other and said, "My style, my show." If Subai hadn't taken a detour to Yingying or because of the traffic jam, maybe none of this would have happened. And now. Happened. Yes, it did happen. Subai was still young at that time, really still young, but at that time, Subai's perception and memory of the surrounding environment actually existed in his blood. But now, it's just been excavated. But why is it that this section is being excavated? Why is it the memory at this time? In fact, it may also be due to the broadcast. I don't know whether the broadcast intentionally or unintentionally gave Subai a head start, which is equivalent to just knitting a sweater. The beginning was the most complicated. After the broadcast started, Subai could continue on with ease. Subai was beating his surroundings crazily now. He was angry. He was angry, not because he saw his father throwing his newborn self into the pool and washing it with cold water, but because Subai found that he had no idea. Way to wake up. This shouldn't be Yingyinger's fault. Subai can ignore this, because Yingyinger doesn't have that kind of ability. All of this may actually be that she has closed herself down. This is the most ridiculous and absurd. Have you locked yourself in a hypnotic state? Then wouldn't he have to accompany the monk and Gyatso to become a vegetative person to perform photosynthesis? Subai discovered that there was a little bright red on his thigh, and this bright red was spreading continuously until it spread to his whole body. This is the breath of the vampire in the research institute. Damn it, what on earth is going on? How could his blood come out of the bottle and merge with himself? The burning feeling continued to hit Subai's whole body, making Subai very painful and tormented. Everything around him seemed to be filled with a layer of blood. "Auntie Dean, the baby is awake." A very clear voice sounded in Subai's ears. Subai found that his eyes were focused again. There was a red mosquito net and a picture of blue sky and white clouds above the bed. It was a very cozy bed, and I was actually lying on the bed at this time. "Auntie Dean." "Well, I understand, thank you, Lychee. It's nothing. Auntie Dean, you and your uncle have a lot to do. It's up to me to take care of my little brother when he's sick." Subai tried hard to open his eyes and saw a pretty girl with a ponytail sitting next to her bed. She was really a beauty. Correct. Just. What was she called? "You go back to class, I'll take care of him," a woman's voice sounded. "Okay, Auntie Dean, you can let your little brother play with our friends in the orphanage in the future. If everyone in the orphanage knows that this is your child, they will definitely like him very much." "Well, okay, it's just that my little brother is sick and in poor health, so he can't go outside to enjoy the air," the woman explained, "so, she can't go out to play." "Oh, so that's it." The little girl looked at Subai lying on the hospital bed with a pitiful expression on her face. "It's really pitiful. Hasn't the little brother been able to enjoy the wind and sun since he was born?" "Yes." "Well, Auntie Dean, I'm leaving now. I'll come to play with my little brother later. I'll spend more time with him." "Okay, welcome." The little girl left the house. Inside the house, Subai was the only one left. No. Subai suddenly realized that there was another person. That person, even if Subai didn't want to admit that name, he still had to call her mother. The woman didn't know what she was doing. It took a few minutes before she came to the bed. She was wearing a blue cheongsam, which showed off her perfect figure. However, when she came over, Subai didn't. I could see every trace of concern on her face, but she looked a little helpless, even impatient. Yes, impatient. Finally woke up, the woman said as she put her hand between Sudbai's eyebrows. This hand was very cold. Sudbai could not detect the slightest warmth from his mother. There was only an almost, it's the coolness that penetrates into your bones. Then let's continue. Su Wanjun, are you going to start again? Not long after he woke up, a man's voice appeared at the door and walked in. That is, Sudbai's father. I don't have time to come all the way here just for him. I'm really annoyed, the woman said rudely. Let him continue to live the life he should live, so that you and I can save a lot of worry. After all, taking care of children is too troublesome and tiring. If this continues, although there is no disadvantage in his memory, this kind of filler memory piecing and input will accumulate layers of haze deep in his heart. I am very afraid that he will eventually grow up. After waking up, he will become mentally distorted and even become. Is he mentally ill? The woman covered her mouth and chuckled twice. That's really interesting, a mentally ill son, haha. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 488. In memory. This should be my home, my old house in Chengdu. Thinking back to the beginning, when Sudbai had not divided up his property, Sudbai didn't know how much he had in terms of real estate at home and abroad. When others traveled to a place, they would first check which hotel was suitable. Sudbai first wanted to see if there was a house of his own there so that he could arrange for someone to clean it in advance so that he could live in it when traveling. This old house in Chengdu plays a very important role in Sudbai's emotions. In his memory, he and his parents lived here for the longest time, so it is also the place that Sudbai cherishes the most. It is precisely for this reason that after the property was divided, this old house from the Republic of China was donated to the local government by Sudbai to protect it as a cultural relic attraction. However, when his parents passed away in a car accident, Sudbai suddenly felt that from the bottom of his heart, he resented living in the old house. At that time, Sudbai had not yet become the little boy's father, and had not even entered the house. The radio becomes the audience. The old house obviously gave him a deep sense of attachment and familiarity, but Sudbai was very disgusted with living here again, even for one more day. After that, Sudbai simply arranged for himself to go to school on the eastern coast. Occasionally when he went back to Chengdu during holidays, Sudbai basically lived in another apartment instead of living in the old house, and even came back. There are very few of them. This place carried many beautiful memories of his childhood. Even Sudbai himself didn't know why, deep down in his heart, he was so resistant to it. At this time, the sky is grey, with a depressing atmosphere. Chengdu is pleasant all year round. It is definitely not as simple as talking about it. Even when thunderstorms are about to fall at this time, it seems that its prefix and foreshadowing are long enough people had time to take back the clothes outside the window. Sudbai only felt that his whole body was floating. He was still in a hypnotic state, and he was still in the virtual spiritual world. However, when the woman who should be called mother put her hand between her eyebrows and exerted a little force, Sudbai felt that he had fallen into complete darkness. This darkness was very scary and made Sudbai very afraid, but Sudbai was helpless. As if, this is your destiny, this is your trajectory. No matter how much I struggle, no matter how much I resist, it seems that I am doomed. This is a kind of despair, a deep despair. The old house was right in front of him. Sudbai reached out and pushed open the door. There was no one in the house, and even the surveillance and security checks did not respond at all. Sudbai just stumbled inside, his breathing becoming very difficult, not because of his body, but because of the fear in his heart, which was getting bigger and bigger. To be honest, Sudbai can accept many things. For example, he can accept everything in the previous memory scenes. Are you a test tube baby whose parents are looking for a surrogate? Acceptable. It's really acceptable. Just think of yourself as Dolly the sheep. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that you're changing into a woman's belly to shape yourself and give birth. There's nothing unimaginable. Besides, your mother is the audience. It's impossible to get pregnant in 10 months. I haven't entered the story world for a month. This may be something that can't be helped. As for his parents' attitude towards him, Subai could understand it. Wasn't it the same way he treated the little ones at the beginning? Maybe it was because they hadn't had time to enter the role of parents. Yes, Subai, whose personality was prone to extremes, actually became so considerate at this time. Every word and deed of his parents could be reasonably explained by Subai. Haha, I have to say, this is really ironic. Even if there is black in front of him, Subai will cover it up with colorful wallpaper. Next door to the old house is a park. At that time, Sichuan opera troupes often came to practice in the park. There were not many people, but the noise was quite loud. But Subai didn't care about this at all at this time. He just continued to move forward firmly and confusedly. Front. It's right in front. That room was the bedroom where I lived the longest since I was a child. In front of the bedroom was an empty courtyard. Subai remembered that his parents often played with him here when he was a child. My father was good at calligraphy with calligraphy, and he would teach himself to practice calligraphy. Every time, my mother would sit next to her, reviewing company documents while smiling and watching the father and son standing there practicing calligraphy seriously. Time, at that time, seemed to have solidified, becoming one of the most beautiful memories in Subai's memory. My father, to put it mildly, is quite a scholar, with a personable demeanor, and is scholarly and natural. But to put it badly, he is a bit indifferent to the atmosphere at home, except for dancing and doing things that literati and poets think are very elegant. The expenses and family property were actually managed by her mother with her own wisdom, and the consortium property that she later inherited came from this. Perhaps, just like him, his parents did not take this little life seriously at first, and then developed a special feeling. In Subai's memory, there are many warm memories of when he and his parents were together, and that was also why, after his parents left in a car accident, Subai's reaction and pressure were so great. Subai walked forward slowly. The closer he got to the door, the less confident he seemed to be. But what was supposed to come should come. Subai finally reached out and pushed the door open, but the door did not move. Subai's whole body, the person floated in, penetrated the door, and entered. Inside the door, Subai's bedroom looked very exquisite, and the display of various furnishings showed that the parents of this family valued their children. However, Subai was stunned for a moment. His body began to tremble. Because even Subai did not dare or was unwilling to accept the scene he saw at this time. A glass container is filled with light blue liquid. These should be nutrient solutions, or culture liquids. Plants do not need soil. They can grow better with these things, but in this huge glass container what was stored was not a plant, but a child about 3 years old. And Subai can be sure. This child. In fact, it is myself. It's really yourself. There is a desk very close to the glass container, and on the desk is the scroll. That scroll had actually been with him since he was 3 years old, but Subai never dreamed that the real purpose of that scroll was this. At this time, what was revealed in the scroll was a painting like this. In the painting, a father and son were standing in front of a stone table in the courtyard practicing calligraphy. A beautiful woman sat behind and was reviewing documents while looking at the father and son. The figure practicing calligraphy showed a happy smile. A black cat squatted on the desk. Every once in a while, he stretched out his paws and flipped the paintings on the scroll to the next scroll, changing to a new scene. After a while, the young man in the container seemed to have discovered something, and his attention was a little distracted. He turned his eyes slightly and saw Subai. The two people's eyes met and collided. The black cat looked around with some doubts, then raised his body slightly and saw that the boy in the container was looking at a mirror in the room. The boy's appearance was reflected in the mirror. The boy was looking at himself in the mirror. Meow. The black cat made a dissatisfied sound, obviously very dissatisfied with the boy for not concentrating on the painting. The young man's eyes were very empty. He seemed to have no consciousness of his own and looked very dull and dull. After hearing this meow, he instinctively focused all his attention on the painting in front of him. In the newly opened scroll, there is an oil painting of a child sitting on the grass cuddling with a woman. In the oil painting, the sky is very blue, the grass is very green, and it seems that you can still see the sheep and yaks in the distance. The wind is very gentle, and the sunshine is very warm. In short, everything in the painting is so beautiful. At this time, the boy in the container also showed a happy and joyful look on his face, as if he was really clinging to his mother's side at this moment. Years. So quiet. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Long. Chapter 489. Hiding from the Rhinan snow. Trying to forget beauty won't let go. Lukangatak Street. Listening to my own heartbeat. A resident singer in the Qing bar was singing affectionately. On the night of the first day of the Lunar New Year, there was a sense of desolation everywhere. In Shanghai, where the foreign population accounts for a large proportion, during the Chinese New Year, people go home. And therefore became somewhat empty. This era is an era in which human beings receive an explosion of information but suffer from spiritual emptiness and pallor. Many people are wondering why they go through so much trouble to return home at this time of year. But no matter how much you don't understand in your heart, no matter how much you resist, you still have to go home when you should go home. After all, day after day, whether fast-paced or leisurely, the same life always has to make some changes at the end of the year. I always wanted to give myself a new start, so I followed the tide and went home to celebrate the new year. Xie Zhen was sitting in a corner of the Qing bar. There were not many people in the Qing bar, but it was not much less than usual. The owner of the Qing bar was a person who was very good at doing business. He had already started to build momentum on Weibo a few years ago. Invite young people who can't go home for the new year to come to your bar and promise free drinks. Of course, the boss will not do a loss-making business. If you don't go home during the Chinese New Year, you won't open the store just to sing about your loneliness and separation. Drinks are free, but the waiter will directly ask you what kind of snacks you want. Those snacks are comparable to it's usually much more expensive, of course, and those who have the time to come here won't be stingy about it. The result is that the business of Qingba owners can maintain its previous level during the off-season during the Chinese New Year, and these young people who have not returned home in Shanghai can have a place to gather together and kill time. Xie Zhen didn't move the coffee and snacks in front of him at all. He just sat there quietly and listened to the song. Xie Zhen is not from Shanghai, or even from Jiangsu and Zhejiang. His hometown is in Liaoning, but he worked hard in Shanghai a long time ago and later met his boss. Home, it doesn't mean anything to me whether I can go back or not. My parents are long gone, and my only sister has her own family, so I have no intention of going back. For the audience, many things can actually be taken lightly, including family ties. It's raining. I don't know who in the bar said something. Xie Zhen looked out the window, and saw that it was raining lightly, injecting a touch of moisture into the already cold air. He stood up, walked out of the bar, stretched out his hand, straightened his suit, and then walked slowly into the rain. What a strange man. Opposite the Qing bar is a hotel. Behind the window of one side of the hotel room, stands a young man with a bruised nose and swollen face. The young man has many bandages on his body and looks very miserable. That's right, this is Count Char. After being beaten by Subaihei more than a month ago, he has not left Shanghai yet, but continues to stay here. I have to say that his courage is really commendable. Standing next to Count Chair is Gu Fan. Gu Fan is wearing a black pullover and a pair of Nike sneakers. This outfit seems to be deliberately hiding his identity. After all, when Gu Fan went out in the past, meticulous suits and leather collars are a must. There are many people like this in Shanghai, Gu Fan reminded. Haha, I don't need you to remind me. Earl Shar pointed at his face. This Earl was beaten like this by your friend. After saying that, Earl Char left the window, picked up a glass of whiskey on the table, and took a sip. The strong wine flowed down his throat and into his lungs, giving him a refreshing feeling. So, do you want to stay here to take revenge? Gu Fan asked. Earl Shar shook his head. I was beaten because I was not strong enough to beat him. I deserved to be beaten like this. If I stayed here just to be a poisonous snake waiting for revenge, then you don't think so of me either. I'm too idle. Boring things like revenge are really not suitable for me. On the other hand, you seem to be a little depressed. What's wrong? It's also quite embarrassing. It's Chinese New Year, so let's not talk about it. Do you still have a cup? Can you buy me a drink? Earl Char poured whiskey into an empty glass next to him. The glass floated and fell into Gu Fan's hand. You Chinese people's attitude towards the New Year is just like the attitude of ancient Greek city-states towards the Olympic Games. During the New Year, any conflicts or even wars can be put aside for the time being. Earl Char took another sip of wine, and then he yawned, obviously a little tired, and this was also a gesture to ask the guests to leave. Gu Fan smoothed his clothes and said seriously, my former friends now know my identity as a Western listener. Isn't this great? You are already a member of our Western circle, but you made your own choice at the beginning, Earl Shar said noncommittally. Earl Shar, do you want to confirm whether that woman will come back? Gu Fan asked. This is not a problem you need to worry about, Earl Shar said very straightforwardly. This time the broadcast was suspended for 3 months. The purpose was simply to concentrate on dealing with the group of people who left about a year ago. And that woman gave you a big nightmare at the time, so you Western circles are very I want to know as soon as possible whether she can come back and whether she has died there. Then, what do you want to explain? Earl Shar shrugged, with a playful smile on his lips. Are they coming back by train? Gu Fan asked. Earl Shar blinked in surprise. How could a person of your level know this? I was also informed of this by someone above me. It was just a coincidence. I planned to book a high-speed rail ticket the day before yesterday, but the payment failed no matter what. Later, I asked a subordinate to help me book it. He told me that there was no high-speed rail car at the time I saw. Things that ordinary people can't see, or can't notice at all but can be seen by listeners, should be the reason why the broadcast is deliberately set up. Gu Fan took out his mobile phone, opened a ticket purchasing app, and said, right here, there is a train from Xi'an to Shanghai at 8 o'clock every morning. It runs every day. The audience cannot buy it. Ordinary people can't buy it missing, and since you, Earl, have stayed in Shanghai and have not left, I will make a bold guess that that group of people should have come back on this train that does not exist at all. As for which day it is at 8 o'clock in the morning, I don't know, but I think it won't be too late. The radio said it was off the air for 3 months. Now more than 2 months have passed. It should be around this time. Actually, there's not much difference between you knowing it and not knowing it. Earl Shar tilted his head slightly, and then said with a smile, I'm sorry, I am a patient who needs to rest. Gu Fan said goodbye, got off the elevator, and walked out of the hotel. When he walked to his car parked on the side of the road outside, a young man in a straight suit and gold-rimmed glasses was standing on the other side of the road looking at him. You're not far away, Gu Fan greeted calmly. Ji Zhen shook his head, looked at Gu Fan, and then looked up at the hotel above. Didn't say anything. It's not that I have nothing to say. but too lazy to speak. Yingying's studio had almost turned into a freezer at this time. Yingying even had to take out her fur and wrap it around her body. She huddled in the corner with frost on her eyebrows. Is shivering. She was so cold, she was so cold. However, she did not leave, because she had no reason to leave. If her client, her patient, had an accident during treatment, she, the doctor, the therapist, naturally had no reason to leave first. Only. It's really cold. There were already many wine bottles at Yingying's feet, which she drank to keep warm. The heating system in the room seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure and had broken down. Wake up quickly, Yingying whispered. She really couldn't bear the low temperature anymore. 2 drops of blood had already flowed out of the jade bottle in the belt of Sudbai's trousers. They were integrated into Sudbai's body one after another, helping Sudbai stimulate blood memory. At this time, the 3rd drop of blood seemed to start to become restless. There was a strange aura that seemed to be breaking out of a cocoon, which was obviously different from the first 2 drops of blood. However, when it just dripped out of the jade bottle, a hand suddenly stretched out and held the jade bottle. A layer of zombie evil energy instantly covered the entire jade bottle, repairing the cracked wall of the bottle. The last drop of blood hit the wall of the bottle, but the wall remained motionless. In the end, it could only stop and became quiet, with a strong sense of unwillingness. Yingying was finally relieved at this time and almost shed tears. It was not that she was worried about Sudbai, but because of a kind of professionalism or professional bottom line, she did not allow herself to leave the patient whose condition was unknown. Therefore, Sudbai slowly sitting up from the bed at this time was a kind of relief for her. She stood up staggeringly. She wanted to leave here. She wanted to find a steam room to steam herself. The cold will make up for it. You're awake, Yingying walked towards Sudbai while rubbing her hands. Then she stopped. The man in front of me did not have the joy of regaining consciousness, nor did he respond to his words, nor did he even have the slightest feedback from his eyes. It seemed that he was still immersed in the dream he had just had and had not yet fully awakened, but his body language and his breath were clearly signs that he had fully woken up. A few moments. 2 lines of bloody tears flowed from the corners of Sudbai's eyes. He is crying. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 490. It was night, except for the dim streets, there was only one young man hanging alone on the whole street. He didn't look very downcast, nor did he look very sad. He was just wrapped in his clothes and breathing lightly, like an ordinary young man who had to take to the streets on a winter night because of something to do. Sudbai remembered that the street should be a food street in normal times, but it was temporarily closed these days. Without the bustle of the past, only some food trucks and signboards are still in place, locked up by chains. Some stall owners have gone home to celebrate the new year, and some are not allowed to do so because the streets are not allowed to do so for less than half of the time these days. People are setting up stalls again to increase the burden of cleaning, so stalls cannot be opened during the market ban, but everyone is still unwilling to give up their stalls, let alone have their food carts and signboards taken away by others. Therefore, there are many iron chains here. At night, under the illumination of the not-so-bright street lights, they look like monsters with teeth and claws, with a kind of silent silence and gaze. There were still residual blood stains in the corners of her eyes. Even though Yingying had wiped them with a wet wipe, she could still see them. Sudbai didn't cry anymore because he didn't think there was any point in crying. Those 2 lines of blood and tears were more of a kind of venting. As for hate, of course there is, but there is no need to show it so obviously, because that would look very artificial. Sudbai himself couldn't explain what kind of emotion he was feeling in his heart right now. It was like all the sauces and condiments in the kitchen were sprinkled together, and he couldn't distinguish any specific taste. Maybe, this is life. Only. My life is simpler, more boring, and more silly and sweet. A smile appeared at the corner of Sudbai's mouth. He took a deep breath, opened his arms, and did not yell loudly in the empty street at night. He just stretched his body naturally and let out a normal hum. Everything is business as usual. Just like everything, it is actually the same as usual. Things in the past, what should happen, have already happened. What it is now has nothing to do with the past. No matter what my growth experience is, no matter how I get through the boring days step by step, I only fill my so-called warm memories in the picture scroll. All of these. It seems that it can't affect me now. I am still myself, and my name is still Sudbai. At least, since I entered the radio industry, all of this has been true, and I have walked these paths myself. At least. The fat man, the monk, and Gyatso are no longer the stories in the scroll, nor are they the memories of me being placed in culture fluid and being forcibly filled day by day. Even though my previous life was short and boring, at least now, I am making my own footsteps step by step. Those who have gone by cannot be admonished, but those who have come can still be pursued. But Sudbai raised his head and looked at the grey night sky. There was no moon or stars. I'm really angry. Pot, 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 pot. A clear sound sounded at this time, as if playing an extremely clear beat. Sudbai turned around and saw a woman behind him, wearing a pair of wooden geta and a kimono, slowly walking towards him. Come. As the woman's footsteps sounded, the street suddenly became lively. Many hawkers appeared, and many people wearing clothes from the last century appeared. There were Japanese and Chinese people walking through. In it, everything here seems to be alive. Hello, sir, I am Kinoshita Yuko. I can't find my way back. Can you take me to find it? The Japanese woman bowed deeply in front of Sudbai and begged, with a sincere tone and a kind attitude. Even the smell of the perfume on her body was so charming. Okay, Sudbai smiled slightly and said this word, but deep down in his heart, there was a surge of anger. Seeing that I was unwilling to give up, seeing that I was restless, seeing that I was dazed, so even these damn things, you lonely ghosts, are you ready to drag me into the water? At the end of the year, the city's popularity is much less, and the breath of living people is weaker. Naturally, things that do not belong to the category of living people begin to quietly become active. But Sudbai took a deep breath. Was he really in such a trance? Even healthy children dare not touch these lonely ghosts. Now, in their eyes, he has become a degenerate person. For those who are frustrated and give up on themselves. Haha, what an irony. Thank you, sir. Sudbai turned around and walked forward. The Japanese woman followed behind Sudbai. The sound of the clogs was still as clear as the beat. Walking ahead, turning a corner, Sudbai walked casually, because Sudbai knew that no matter how he walked, unless he used his own strength to break the illusion in front of him, the direction he was going and the place he was going to would be. It was still set by these lonely ghosts. This is a middle school. Sudbai still had an impression of this middle school. When the monk came to Shanghai, he drove to pick him up. Then he encountered Yin soldiers on the way. A group of Japanese soldiers shuttled past the traffic light intersection and was discovered by the monk. Immediately after the monk, after chasing them all the way, they arrived in front of the school. Finally, the final location determined was the school playground. The monk had originally invited Sudbai to dig the school playground together, but Sudbai refused. It seemed that the monk himself did not have time to do it, so he delayed it. Otherwise, these lonely ghosts would not bring yourself here. It was Chinese New Year, so the school was on holiday. There was an old guard in the guard room, lying on the table and snoring. When Sudbai walked over, the guard didn't respond at all. Is this here? Sudbai asked. Yes, that's right, it seems to be a little further in. The Japanese woman who called herself Kinoshita Yuko lowered her head and said these words, but her face hidden in the darkness showed excitement at this time of distortion. Success, success, a living person came over, enough, really enough, this is a great harvest, great harvest. Subai looked around. There must be something wrong somewhere, so these lonely ghosts dared to go to the streets to attack living people. However, this is not a bad thing for Subai. We continued walking inside, past the teaching building, and entered the playground. The plastic track and plastic lawn on the playground looked very quiet in the dark, and even gave people an eerie feeling. Subai's feet stepped on the lawn. Kinoshita Yuko raised her head and revealed a blood-stained face to Subai's back. Roll. A male voice came from the playground. Kinoshita Yuko's numb face immediately lowered her head, showing a look of horror. However, when she was about to leave, the person who made the sound had already walked up to her, and a blue firefly flew out from the man's body. Directly hit the Japanese woman, who immediately let out a shrill scream and dissipated into a wisp of black smoke with the smell of corpses. Subai exhaled heavily. Some people are always so unpleasant. What happened to you that you were tricked by these wild ghosts? In the past few days, Shanghai has been experiencing great fluctuations in all aspects because of the impending incident, and those dirty things have been stimulated to dare to come out. This place should have been a Japanese military hospital or something like that before. After Japan surrendered, there were many Japanese people here. Soldiers and their families committed suicide here and died for their country. Gong Zihai's figure came out of the darkness. It doesn't seem like you need to worry about it. Subai pointed at Gong Zihai's crotch unscrupulously. Are you here for revenge? Okay, come on. Back then, in the underwater cave of Kinhuangdao, part of Lin Zhou's soul was completely lost in the mirror. Subai successfully set up a counterattack, crippled Lin Zhou and swallowed Lin Zhou's eyes, and then stepped on them to explode. He plotted against his son Hai's balls. It's annoying. It's not like you don't know that I'm gay. I really wish you could help me get rid of that extra thing. But this broadcast is quite strange. After that time, when I entered the story world, the broadcast didn't ask anyone. With their consent, they put that thing back on me, which really pissed me off. Whether what Gong Zihai said is true or not, whether he really didn't care about Subai stepping on his balls is highly debatable, but one thing Gong Zihai knows very well is that Subai's current mood is very unstable. To put it simply, Gong Zihai found out, and now Subai seems to just want to find someone to fight. After the incident in Kinhuangdao, Gong Zihai survived, but I also heard about what happened afterwards. Taizi and Junior, who were both seniors, were killed by Subai for unknown reasons, and now two of them were killed. The senior Subai was still alive. For some reason, Gong Zihai seemed to see the shadow of his sister in Subai. Have you seen me before when you were in the orphanage? Subai suddenly asked. No, my sister has seen you. I remember that she said you were very cute, but you were seriously ill and very pitiful. Gong Zihai smiled slightly. I think the dean's uncle and dean's aunt should have loved you very much at that time, just like me at that time. My sister decided to use the power of the audience to save me just before I was seriously ill and dying, and then, you know, I became a listener after that. Maybe the dean's uncle and dean's aunt love you too much and can't bear to let you continue to suffer from the disease, so they use the power of the audience to treat you. There are no parents who don't love their children. Subai smiled slightly. This smile was hidden in the darkness and could not be detected, but he still nodded and slowly agreed. Yes, I know, my parents love me very much. They, really, extremely love. I. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 491. This is a night market stall run by local residents. The stall is not big, with only 3 small tables. The owner is a disabled person in a wheelchair. He is responsible for cooking and barbecue, while his mother-in-law and one son are responsible for greeting the guests and clearing away the bowls. Chopsticks. Subai and Gongzihai just walked here, and then naturally found an empty table and sat down. Boss, stir up some hot dishes and get 2 cans of beer first, Gongzihai shouted to the boss. Gongzihai was not a person who always liked to speak in a tone of voice. He seemed to only show his affection to those he liked. My gay temperament is usually not that demonic. Okay, wait, the boss responded and immediately started preparations. Gongzihai took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped it on the greasy plastic dining table. Since you feel dirty, don't choose this place, Subai said. He knew that Gongzihai had a misophobia. Haha, it's just a problem I picked up over the past few years. I came out of an orphanage. In fact, I'm really not that poor. You are different from me. You have been well-fed and well-fed since you were a child. If we get used to it, we can change places. I am indeed different from you. Subai picked up the beer can that Gongzihai had opened for him, and when he was about to take a sip, he suddenly thought of the culture solution in the glass vessel, and he immediately felt sick. He closed his eyes, raised his head, and took a big sip despite the nausea. Some cold beer poured into his stomach, which made Subai feel a little relaxed. Why, you don't seem to be in a good mood, Gongzihai asked, grabbing a handful of melon seeds. It was like friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time were sitting together chatting about home life. However, the actual situation is that the two met a few months ago. In Kinhuangdao, they were still plotting to stab each other in the back. In the end, they saw red, and it was deep red. I want to fight. Subai looked at Gongzihai and said seriously, you and I can fight. No, 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 Gongzihai shook his head quickly. I came to Shanghai this time to pick up someone, but I didn't plan to live or die with you or get seriously injured. Picking someone up, Subai took another sip of beer, holding the beer can in his right hand and shaking it gently. Picking up your sister? That's Gongzihai's sister. But Subai couldn't figure out why he came to Shanghai to pick up people. Could it be that those people were teleported back from Shanghai? Well, we're coming back. Take the train. Gongzihai spat out a piece of melon seed shell. You and my sister are friends. Why don't you accompany me to pick her up? Take the train. Subai suddenly felt a little funny. Why do you feel that those big shots are like educated youths returning to the city who went to the mountains and countryside, and they actually took the train back together? Do you also want to make a banner with the welcome broadcast written on it? Are the chairman's good sons going home? Who knows? The last time we left, we took the train together. No, we disappeared. When we come back, we should go back the same way. It's right at the Shanghai high-speed railway station. And there have been signs and clues recently. We're never leaving. 10. Gongzihai smiled. It's good to look like this. You can't say that when they come back one by one, they will turn into a big fireball and fall from the sky like the Terminator. By the way, the Terminator is like this. Did you show up? I just remember the Terminator coming out, naked. Ahem. Gongzihai waved his hand. Okay, let me tell you the truth, whether they can come back, how many of them can come back, whether all of them can come back, whether Guangxu and Quantail are seriously injured, or even dying, this nothing is known. Moreover, it is said that on that day, senior listeners did not dare to go near there. Only listeners at our level dared to go near the train station to pick up the train. Advanced listeners, even if they dare not get involved in cause and effect, have certain reactions and opportunities between their own strength and the surrounding environment. This kind of induction is not the same as cause and effect, but it is easy to be forcibly dragged onto the train and taken to that place. Therefore, they dare not. Radio has always wanted to attract people to that place. As for the ethics of radio, you also know it, so on that day, It is estimated that high-end listeners who originally lived in Shanghai would leave the city in advance, let alone go to the train station. Haha, are you going to pick up your sister at the train station, or are you trying to snatch her belongings? Subai asked calmly, and he heard something in Gong Zihai's words. My sister will also understand me. If something unexpected happens to her, and I am still worried, being pretentious and not fully prepared to snatch the things she left behind, then my sister will be disappointed. Really angry. So what? Subai shrugged. You're telling me this not to ask me to wait until that day to go to the station with you to steal your sister's relics, right? If my sister really had an accident, her relics should be left in the car when she comes back. In order to protect these relics from others, there will definitely be arrangements to make it as convenient as possible for those of us who have a relationship with her. People who can get it will not take advantage of others. Based on the relationship between you and my sister, I think it makes perfect sense for my sister to leave something for you. Even if she doesn't leave anything for you, I can split the things I get with you half and half. Besides, if you're lucky, you might get someone else's relics. What do you think? It's so realistic. Subai took another sip of beer. It's also disgusting. This is the life of the audience, Gong Zihai said. At this time, several dishes had been served one after another. Subai picked up a pair of disposable chopsticks, separated them first, and said before picking up the food, let's check the situation first. It's in Shanghai anyway. It's quite close. It would be a pity not to see the excitement, but I guess I will be there by then. There must be a lot of senior people going there. People die for money and birds die for food. Everyone wants to try their luck. Everyone thinks luck is on their side, but I will not let my sister's relics fall into the hands of others. This is a big deal for me. A bottom line that can't be compared to even the one you stepped on when I was hit. Subai suddenly laughed, pointed at Gong Zihai with chopsticks and said, one relic after another. You said that if the train arrives at the station, you rush up in a hurry and spend a lot of time hacking and killing with others. Wang Ku went in first, and found that your sister walked out of the train alive, dragging her suitcase. Would you be disappointed? That's not the case. I hope she can come back alive more than anyone else, Gong Zihai said seriously. I do believe this. Subai really believed it, because if Li Ji came back, anyone who knew the relationship between Li Ji and Gong Zihai would really not dare to do any dirty tricks against Gong Zihai, whether in the story world or in the world. In the real world, Gong Zihai is like having a talisman. You must know that Li Ji is a woman who dares to wipe out a city. In the past, due to Gong Zihai's low profile and Li Ji's intentional protection, the relationship between Gong Zihai and Li Ji was rarely known. However, after the Qinhuangdao incident, this identity was basically exposed. Then I'll contact you again. Gong Zihai stood up, took out his wallet, went to pay the bill, and then left. Subai spent half an hour sitting there, eating and drinking, and then got up, picked up a napkin, wiped his mouth, and then took a taxi. Where are we going? The taxi driver asked. Devil's Finger Heaven, Subai said. The Magic Finger Paradise is not very far from here. 20 minutes later, the taxi arrived. After paying the bill, Subai got out of the car. This is a leisure club that specializes in massage services. Of course, this kind of club must have that kind of. It just depends on whether the boss's relationship is strong enough and whether the customer's consumption card level is high enough. When Subai walked in, a waiter at the door showed Subai the way very thoughtfully. Every male and female waiter he met along the way would bend down and say hello, sir. A tall female foreman wearing a miniskirt and overalls walked up to Subai and said, hello, sir, is this your first time coming to our place to shop? I will arrange a private room for you. I'm looking for Boss 9, Subai said, Jushin City. The female foreman smiled slightly awkwardly, sorry, our boss is not here today. Since you know our boss, I can make the decision and give you a 20% discount. Go and ask him to come out to see me. Just contact him and tell him that someone named Sue is looking for him. That's okay. I'll arrange a private room for you first, and then call our boss. Subai was led into a private room by the female foreman. The interior was very delicately decorated and the dim pink lighting made people feel very comfortable. Can I ask the technicians to come in and let you choose first? The female foreman asked while clocking in. What do you want to drink? Whatever. Subai lay down on the massage bed. On the opposite wall was a big screen, which was showing a very charming tea stage show with a theme like Victoria's Secret. Okay, please wait a moment. The female foreman bowed slightly, backed out, and closed the door. Jo Xiankan is the son of Brother Ju. After Subai learned the truth about his childhood, Subai did not seem to be greatly stimulated, nor did he give up on himself, nor did he complain about others or use alcohol to drown his sorrows. He even agreed to the young master's promise. Go to the train station a few days after crossing the sea. However, this does not mean that Subai just brushed off this page. Ju Ji was his parents' bodyguard. After his parents left in a car accident, he went to the south to study and live not long after. Ju Ji brother also followed and opened a courier station. In fact, he was still protecting Subai secretly. Later, he fell into a coma because of helping Subai transport the bronze box. He is still placed in a nursing home in Chengdu by Subai. Inside. But in his own memory, Brother Ju often appeared in the scenes when he was getting along with his parents. At the same time, Brother Ju often brought his son, who was about the same age as Subai, to play with Subai. That child is called Jushin City. After a while, the door of the private room was gently pushed open, revealing the face of a man. The man glanced at Subai on the massage bed and immediately exclaimed, "Master, why didn't you say hello before you came to my place? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 492. Although Jo Xiankan is about the same age as Subai, he has an aura of vicissitudes of life. His short hair makes him look very capable, and his face is fair and clean without any scars. He is the same as his father Ju Tiancheng. It's not like him at all, but someone who can open such a big club at such a young age is naturally not too simple. Brother Ninth is an old man in Subai's family. He used to be a guard for Grandpa Subai, and was later transferred to Subai's father by Grandpa Subai. The Red family in China still prefers this family-style guard inheritance, because this provides greater assurance of loyalty. Originally, Jushin City was going to follow Ju Ji's path and enter the Su family system, but Jushin City rebelled against his father's wishes and chose to go out on his own. For this matter, Jushin City, the son, and Ju Ji, the relationship between the father and the father was basically at loggerheads, and the two sides even severed contact with the father and son. Brother Ju was at ease doing his own things, and Jushin City was at ease with his career. One pretended that he had no son, and the other pretended that he did not have a father. However, some habits are difficult to break. Subai remembered that Jushin City had asked him to call him young master from the very beginning when he saw him. Although he could no longer be a family-style guard, the title cannot be changed for a while. Subai didn't know whether Jushin City knew that he had cut off all the property in his name, but it didn't matter whether Jushin City knew it or not. According to ordinary people's thinking, even if Subai has now become a pauper, after all, he is also a direct grandson of the Su family. As the owner of a gray area entertainment venue, he would not dare to offend a guy with such a background, even if, well, Subai actually doesn't have much interaction with the Su family. According to Subai's current thinking, he might have been taken home by his parents after he was born. He met the elders and registered, which was equivalent to telling the two families that he had a son named Subai. Then his parents threw him directly into the culture solution and let the painting accompany him, weaving a false childhood memory for him. Many things in childhood are actually fake. Many things in childhood are actually appearances in paintings. But the saddest thing is, you don't know what is true in this, and you don't know what is false in it. Among them, Jushin City is included. In Sudbai's memory, after his parents left in a car accident, the people closest to him were the housekeeper of the old house, the maid of the old house, and the bodyguard Juji. It's just that the old housekeeper and the old maid died 2 years after Sudbai went to the eastern coast, and ninth brother is now lying unconscious in a sanatorium in Chengdu. When did you emerge from the petri dish? The only thing that is certain is that the life that I lived from the moment my cheap parents escaped in a car accident should be real. No wonder I was sitting alone at the dining table in depression and missing my parents. On the other hand, he urgently wants to leave this place and go to the eastern coastal area. The latter may be his sixth sense. After his parents passed away in a car accident, Sudbai inherited the entire consortium by himself, and later came into contact with Jushin City. At that time, Jushin City was already a mixed bag of black and white. Treat yourself to a meal, and take a small bite from the left. The young master took a bite of the young master just to get a bidding quota from Sudbai. For the sake of ninth brother, Sudbai gave it to him at that time. And now, Sudbai found Jushin City again because he wanted to ask about it. In the past, for example, when he was a child, he met him for the first time, played shooting games with him in the yard, and watched animations with him. Movies, those memories, did they happen, were they in paintings, or were they real? This is very important to Sudbai. Master, do you have business with me or do you just want to relax? Chat. Sudbai replied. Sure, go to my office. I'll ask someone to bring up a table of hot pot from the hot pot city next door. As a Chengdu native, you will never forget the taste of hot pot wherever you go. Sudbai shook his head. No, I just had dinner. Let's chat here, you and me. Joshiankan nodded. There happened to be a waiter outside bringing tea. Joshiankan opened the door and took it in person, placing it next to Sudbai's massage bed. Does the young master have any instructions? Jushin City asked. No, I really just want to chat. Do you remember when you and I first met? Sudbai asked. I remember, I was only 4 years old at that time. I went to the old house for the first time and met the young master. At that time, the young master was a little weak, but he knew a lot. Joshiankan replied. That day, I will give you something, Sudbai said. It's a writing brush. The young master was practicing calligraphy at that time. I was playing next to you and I disturbed you. My dad punished me. Then the young master gave me a writing brush. But, that writing brush can't find it. All answered. Sudbai suddenly felt a little relieved. It seemed that his parents would occasionally let him out for a walk, and he did not stay in the culture solution all the time. In Sudbai's memory, his parents rarely spent time with him. Maybe, his parents just used that painting to replace the time they should have spent with him. Reason? Maybe it's just troublesome. People always try their best to grab any straw around them when they are at their weakest and most helpless. Sudbai is almost like this now. Master, let me get you some wine, Joshiankan said. Good. Sudbai nodded. Sudbai had asked all the questions that should be asked. Now that Sudbai was in a much better mood, he might as well have a drink. Joshiankan left the private room and first asked a female foreman outside to bring the wine he had stored in the office, and then he went straight to the bathroom. In the bathroom, Joshiankan washed his face, wiped it with a tissue, took a deep breath and walked out of the bathroom. When Joshiankan returned to the private room, Sudbai had already poured 2 glasses of red wine himself and placed them on the small coffee table brought by the waiter. Thank you, Master. Joshiankan took the red wine and took a sip, feeling a little flattered. Sudbai also took a sip. The wine was good. Since I cut my own property, I have seldom drank such good red wine. Even now, Sudbai doesn't know whether it is right or wrong to cut off his property, but Sudbai rarely struggles with right and wrong. If he just wants to simply pursue food and drink enjoyment, he will not spend even a penny now. Can do it? Master, did you really come to me just to have a simple chat? Well, also, do you know where Brother Ninth is now? Sudbai asked. In Sichuan, the young master sent someone to tell me, but I didn't go. Jushin City was very honest. It seemed that the conflict between him and his father had completely reached an insoluble level. It was not convenient for Sudbai to say anything about other people's family matters. Of course, Sudbai was too lazy to say anything. After finishing the glass of wine, Sudbai stood up and left. Jushin City sent Sudbai to the door. Master, let me drive you back, Joshiankan said. No, it's convenient for me to take a taxi back. After saying that, Sudbai reached out and patted Joshiankan's shoulder gently. I've been doing well in the past 2 years, and I'm much cleaner. When Sudbai said clean, he meant that this guy from Jushin City, who was all about black and white, didn't have any resentment in him. This guy was simply more pure than those bald donkeys in the temple who were eating fast and chanting Buddha's name. Obviously, Jushin City understood what Sudbai meant, nodded and smiled. The social environment is different. It's not the same as before. There was a movie called Old Pal the year before last, and that's pretty much what it meant. Also, young master, you know that this is the mainland, and the environment here is different from Europe, America, and even Hong Kong and Taiwan. If you just follow the old method of being a gangster here, the ending will be miserable. Just take care of yourself. Sudbai got into the taxi and drove away in front of Jushin City. Joshiankan stood there and kept waving his hands, and then he put it down when he felt his arms were a little numb. At this time, his face was already dripping with cold sweat. He stumbled back to the elevator of the club, went straight to the 5th floor, and entered his office. Joshiankan suddenly sat on his boss's chair, loosened his collar, and breathed heavily. About 10 minutes later, Jushin City seemed to have woken up from the state of fear. He reached out and opened a small safe under the desk in front of him with a slight trembling, and took out a slightly yellowed letter from it. Holding the letter in his hand, Joshiankan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Joshiankan did not take out the contents of the envelope because he knew what was inside and had seen it many times. Inside was a piece of letter paper and 2 photos from his father. Pursing his lips, just when Jushin City was about to put the letter back, the office door that was originally locked was pushed open inexplicably. Joshiankan raised his head with some confusion and looked at the person who came in. I accidentally left my phone in the box, but the head waiter was very strict and didn't allow me to go in and get it directly. She said she would have to ask someone to find it first, and then confirm whether I was the owner of the phone. This was too troublesome, so I came to find it. Just tell me, I'm in a hurry to go back. While talking, Sudbai walked towards Jushin City. Then, Sudbai's eyes fell on the envelope in Jushin City's hand. What is it? It still needs to be locked in the safe. Can you show it to me? Sudbai asked. But Jushin City knows clearly. He actually didn't mean to ask a question or request. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 493. Even ordinary people can clearly realize that Sudbai definitely didn't just leave something here and come back to get it, let alone a boss like Jushin City who can create a huge leisure club. Facing Sudbai, Joshiankan slowly closed his eyes, holding the envelope tightly with his left hand, and pulled out a blade from his cuff with his right hand, but his hands were trembling. Are you afraid of me? Sudbai pointed at his face, looking a little confused. This doubt was very sincere, and indeed very sincere. I have felt from the previous chat that you are afraid of me, which I don't understand. I remember that when you came to me for a project a few years ago, you were not like this. This is the reason why Sudbai comes back again and again. Jushin City is a ruthless man who mixes black and white. He inherited the genes of his father, Brother Ju. Such a person, whether he joins the military system or society, it's only a matter of time before you get good results, so Jushin City's ability to disguise must be very good. However, there are some things and some details that even the most brilliant Oscar winner cannot do perfectly. Moreover, his mood swings or even the fear flickering deep in his eyes was still captured by Sudbai. After all, Sudbai has long since outgrown the stage of purely observing people with his eyes. Whether in the story world or in the real world, if he can't see people or can't see people accurately, the split head grass may have already very high. So, this is very strange. Why is Jushin City afraid of itself? If it is a low-level audience, it is normal to have fear and awe when facing Sudbai, but it is obvious that Jushin City is not an audience, and the audience is not a cabbage on the roadside, just anyone they meet. And now, he even took out a blade in his right hand. It seemed that he wanted to take action on himself, but he was still hesitant because he was too afraid. It's not that he is reluctant to kill himself, but because he may feel that he can't kill himself. This is the message Sudbai observed. Sudbai stretched out his hand to grab the letter. The flesh on Joshienken's face suddenly twitched at this moment, and then he let out a low roar similar to that of a wild beast. He turned around and stood up straight with his right leg. His knees were pressed against Sudbai's lower abdomen, his left arm was strangled directly towards Sudbai's neck, and the fingers of his right hand held the blade and slashed decisively towards Sudbai's throat. Sudbai stood still, and the opponent's knee hit Sudbai's lower abdomen hard. Sudbai's whole body also bent down, and then the opponent strangled his neck and slashed his throat with a blade, and blood spurted out immediately. Out. Immediately afterwards, Joshienken let go. He watched Sudbai slowly kneel on the ground, and he himself looked in disbelief. Died. Joshienken pursed his lips, put the envelope on the desk, then picked up a bottle of wine on the table, twisted open the cap and took 2 big gulps. It seemed that only alcohol could relieve his nervousness at this time. Get a moment of relief. However, when Joshienken just put the bottle down from his mouth, he was shocked to find that Sudbai, who should have been lying on the ground dead, was standing upright in front of him, and the envelope he had just placed on his desk, appeared in Sudbai's hand. There was no expression on Sudbai's face. He just opened the envelope slowly and calmly. The 2 photos that slipped out were caught by Sudbai in his hand. Then, a piece of letter paper floated out. Jushin City looked at Sudbai with horror on his face. It seemed that he was not surprised at all by the result in front of him. He seemed to accept his fate. He put his head in his hands and squatted down in front of Sudbai. He was not admitting his mistake, but accepting his fate. Sudbai glanced at the 2 photos, then took the letter in his hand and read it again. During the whole process, Jushin City was squatting on the ground, like a person who was in deep despair, and had lost the courage to struggle. He did not get angry and attack Sudbai again. The whole process was very calm, even so calm that it was a bit embarrassing. A smile appeared at the corner of Sudbai's mouth, and he put the 2 photos in his pocket, and then held the letter in his palm. The evil spirit exploded in his palm, and the piece of paper turned into something in an instant. Dust. Then, Sudbai's eyes fell on Joshienken. He stretched out his hand, grabbed Joshienken's hair, and pulled Joshienken. Sudbai forced Joshienken to stand up. Joshienken looked at Sudbai with undisguised fear in his eyes. Haha, Sudbai laughed twice. Even if I am a ghost, it is really a bit embarrassing for you, a gangster, to be scared like this by a kid. After letting go, Joshienken fell to the ground and did not dare to get up. It seemed that the attack on Sudbai just now had drained all his courage. Sudbai walked to the window, his breathing seemed very steady, and even his walking posture revealed a kind of calmness. However, the atmosphere of the entire office almost took a turn for the worse at this moment. Raising his palm, Subai seemed to hesitate for a moment, then slowly took it back. Jushin City felt as if his whole body was being lifted up by a terrifying force. Just when he was about to be crushed into a pulp, that force disappeared without a trace. He breathed heavily, and it took him a long time to muster up the courage to look at where Subai was standing before. The window is open. The person is no longer there. He didn't kill himself? Why didn't he kill himself? The car was driving very fast, obviously speeding, but Subai didn't feel it at all. The speed of the car was far less than the instantaneous burst of speed when the audience was actually fighting. The windows on both sides of the car were open, and the strong evening breeze blew in through the windows, making Subai's slightly longer hair look messy. But now, no matter how messy the night breeze was, it was not as messy as Subai's heart. If you think you want to fool your elders, so you have no choice but to use surrogacy to give birth to me. I admit it. I can understand that too. You needed me to be born for other purposes, to complete one of your plans, and then you thought it would be too troublesome to bring me up, or there would be some unforeseen factors, so you put me in a glass culture medium and let me grow up. I was like a vegetable, looking at the pictures in the scroll every day and dreaming, filling in a false childhood memory. I admit it, and I can understand it. No matter how angry I am, no matter how helpless I am, no matter how aggrieved I am, I can understand. You are the audience. The environment you are in and the things you face have distorted your character and your human values. I understand too. Because I am also a listener. Because I'm twisted too. No matter how you treated my childhood, no matter how you treated my birth, no matter how you treated my life. I admit it all. Even, no matter how great the hatred is, if I meet you again in the future, I can still nod to you and pass you a cigarette. Even if it is impossible to call you mom and dad, I can at least maintain the most basic respect. Whether you are intentional or not, you at least created me, you at least gave me life. At least, calculated, I am much happier and luckier than those children who have lived in domestic violence since childhood. Even if my childhood was false, at least that dream, that false memory, was still beautiful. You are my parents, you created me, you allowed me to survive. According to ordinary family ethics, I should hate you. But according to the relationship between the audience, I should be grateful to you. No matter how you treat me, no matter how you treat my son. I can understand it, tolerate it, and bear it. I am Subai. I am living my life now. I don't want to be too entangled in my past. I am too lazy to look back at my past. I have cut off all the properties you left me. I will go to Kinhuangdao too. I also killed Taizi and Junior. I was willing to bear the punishment and story world broadcast on the radio, I was willing to accept the crime, and I was even willing to die. But at this thought, Subai's eyes suddenly turned red. That's crazy. That violence. That's terrible. That hysteria. The violent evil spirit enveloped the entire car at this time. When other vehicles outside saw this pusa, they would think it was a black fog sneaking around. For Subai, what he emphasizes is that even when we are angry and facing each other, we must smile, and even when we stab each other, we must have a beautiful rhythm. Even when he was ill, Subai only became surprisingly calm. It was rare for him to show all his crazy emotions to the outside. But at this time, Subai showed it. Because the reality he faced was far more subversive than what he saw from his blood memory. The meaning of his existence and the way his so-called parents treated him were actually not what he had understood and was willing to understand before. Originally, the so-called truth made Subai feel very uncomfortable, and even made him unable to breathe in pain. But when the real truth is revealed, that bloody feeling, that almost ironic feeling, Sudbai completely fell into madness. Dad, Mom, I don't know if you can hear it now. I don't know if I should still call you this. I don't know where you are now. I don't even know if you regard me as a son or a descendant. But please rest assured. No matter you are at the end of the world, no matter whether you are still hiding in this world, no matter whether even the radio cannot find you. Do not worry. Real. Please rest assured. As a son, I will definitely practice filial piety one day. For you. The Body Collector. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 494. Susan left Hongdong County and came to the main street. I feel miserable before I speak, but the gentlemen of the past listen to my words. Which one is going to Nanjing to pass the message to my Saburo? He said that if Susan loses his life, I will repay him by being transformed into a dog or horse in the next life. The fat man was sitting on the sofa at this time, drinking tea and listening to Peking opera leisurely. This part belonged to the Peking opera Susan Chiji. It was not that the fat man suddenly became more elegant and liked this piece, but that he liked it every time. When Susan heard this, he felt like someone, which made him feel secretly happy. At this time, the phone suddenly rang. Hey, Dabai, you've been out for 2 days and haven't been at home for years. What are you busy with? The fat man asked. I'm outside the house, please come out. Okay. The fat man stood up, walked out of the living room and outside the house. Seeing that Sudbai was not in the courtyard, he opened the door and walked outside. Sudbai's pusa stopped a few meters away. The fat man took out a cigarette, lit it and walked over. Dong dong dong. The fat man knocked on the cab window. Congratulations on getting rich and good luck in the new year. The fat man congratulated. Sudbai opened the car door and walked out. The cigarette in the fat man's mouth fell to the ground. He subconsciously took a few steps back and looked at Sudbai. Dabai, what's wrong with you? Who messed with you? The bronze box, do you remember it? Sudbai asked. Ah, that box, remember, what happened to the one I took from your hand? The fat man shrugged, looking very innocent and said, I wasn't familiar with you before, so I bullied you because you were a new listener. Just wait, if you want that bronze box now, I will bring it to you from Chengdu later, and I also have something to tell you. Sudbai took 2 steps forward and approached the fat man. Tell me, who asked you to come forward and take the bronze box away from me? This. The fat man was speechless for a moment, probably hesitating. Explain. Sudbai continued to approach Fatty. I promised to keep it a secret, Dabai, please. Boom. Sudbai kicked him over. Fortunately, the fat man had already discovered that Sudbai's mood was abnormal at this time. In addition, the fat man was also experienced, so he immediately placed his fists in front of him to block Sudbai's kick. But Fatty himself didn't expect that after not seeing him for 2 days, the mental patient in front of him would have his bloodline strength further improved, and the power of this kick would be much higher than he expected. Damn it, it makes no sense, how could a mentally ill patient progress so quickly? The fat man miscalculated, or he should not have been in close contact with Sudbai in the first place. He was kicked backwards and fell to the ground. Babai, you are crazy. Tell me who it is. Sudbai continued to approach, and the murderous intention on his body was already obvious. At this time, Sudbai used his actual actions and the murderous intention in his body to tell the fat man without reservation. Either tell me the answer I want. Either die. Dabai, listen to my explanation, listen to me, listen to me. As soon as the fat man got up, he saw the bloodline emerging from the center of Sudbai's eyebrows, covering Sudbai's body almost instantly, and Sudbai rushed towards him at an even faster speed. This time, Fatty no longer dared to neglect. He opened his palms while shouting, revealing his flying sword. As the flying sword flew, a barrier directly enveloped it. Bang! 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 Subai hit the barrier with one punch after another without any scruples. The barrier continuously released extremely sharp spikes that penetrated Subai's body and scratched out wounds, but Subai he didn't care at all. Finally, in about 7 or 8 strokes, Fatty's barrier was broken by Subai in such a violent way. Without any hesitation or delay, Subai rushed towards the fat man again. This is clearly a fight or die attitude. Oh my God, I'm scared, I tell you, I tell you. The fat man finally raised his hands and surrendered. On the one hand, he didn't want to fight Subai in the first place, and it was a real fight of life and death. On the other hand, he really knew that if Subai got serious, he would definitely kill him, regardless of whether there was friendship or not. Subai stopped and looked at the fat man. The fat man took 2 deep breaths and pursed his lips. When you first arrived in Chengdu, someone did notify me to go to your place to bring a box over. I originally promised that person not to tell you, but now she is not here anyway. Lychee? Subai asked. The fat man nodded seriously. Yes, it is indeed Lychee. Otherwise, why do you think I was so idle and so lucky that I stopped your car at that time and got on it? Where is that bronze box now? Subai asked. In Chengdu, my hometown, I have been hiding, Fatty said. Have you opened him? I've opened it, the fat man nodded and said truthfully. Is it possible for a person like me to see a strange box and not try to open it? What is inside? Inside. Fatty looked into Subai's eyes and sighed. It's empty. Although winter has already entered, and even the new year has just passed, it is still a very cold season in other parts of China, but in Chengdu, winter is not very cold, at least for people who have lived in the eastern coastal areas and the northeast. The winter in Chengdu is simply too gentle to be true. A female nurse wearing a white nurse skirt walked into a ward, changed the clothes of the convalescent patient, and wiped his body. Then a specialized massage therapist came over to give him a body massage. After that, another nurse came and moved him into a wheelchair and pushed him out for a walk. Today, it's sunny outside. This patient lives here alone. When he first moved in the year before last, there was a young man who came to see him from time to time. But in the past year, no one has come to see him. However, the whole staff of the nursing home did not treat him badly. Because the young man who sent him in at the beginning directly transferred the highest standard of medical expenses to the nursing home account, which was enough for the patient to stay for more than 50 years. However, this patient's current condition is not very good. Although he can open his eyes, he does not seem to have much consciousness. He still relies on liquid food every day for food. However, he can have some self-awareness during defecation and knows how to press it gently. The button on my hand calls the caregiver. In the opinion of the doctor in the sanatorium, on the one hand, this patient has a certain ability of self-awareness, but on the other hand, this consciousness is only a rough instinctive consciousness. His whole person, his personal consciousness, is actually not. He didn't really wake up, and this was very different from an ordinary stroke. It's just that there are a lot of strange diseases in the sanatorium, so it doesn't cause too much trouble. Just continue to live there. Anyway, the money is enough. The Chinese New Year atmosphere has also spread to the nursing home. New Year couplets are posted everywhere and many red lanterns are hung. It is said that there are also theatrical performances organized by the patients and doctors themselves. District leaders will also come here to take part in the photo session. Newspaper. The nurse pushed the patient lying on the wheelchair slowly. The patient's eyes were a little dull and he could only look straight ahead. This seemed to be his habit over the past year, always looking ahead, as if waiting. What people are the same? However, at this moment, the patient's eyes focused, his face showed excitement and disbelief, and his body began to twitch and tremble. What's wrong with you? What's wrong? The nurse pushing the wheelchair immediately noticed the situation and immediately picked up the communicator and planned to call the doctor. The conditions and standards of this nursing home were indeed very high, otherwise the patient would not have been sent here in the first place. However, before the nurse could press the button to speak, she immediately fainted and the transmitter fell to the ground. The patient in the wheelchair looked at the person who was slowly approaching and squatting down in front of him. His lips were slurping, and his whole body seemed to be greatly stimulated by the person in front of him. "Brother Ninth, I'm here to see you." The other person's voice was a little hoarse. Brother Ju's body was shaking more and more violently. He seemed to want to break free from the wheelchair and stand up, but he couldn't. This violent physical reaction was the limit of what he could do with his body. "I'm also sad to see you like this, Brother Ninth." The other party's hand held Brother Ninth's hand, as if he was talking to an elder he was familiar with a feeling of remembrance and remembrance. "But, you should have opened the box in front of him," the other party said seriously, with a light blame tone. "If you had been more decisive, you wouldn't be lying in this wheelchair now." "On. Can't, I, can't, can." Brother Jew made a vague sound, appearing very stubborn and excited. "Why not?" The other party obviously couldn't understand. "Do you know that I have been waiting for that moment for many years, but in the end, you forced me to wait for 2 more years. 2 years, 2 years. He is, young master." Brother Jew worked hard to pronounce these syllables to express his attitude. After hearing this sentence, the other party obviously fell into a state of hysteria, almost roaring. "Fart, you should know what kind of young master he is, you should understand. He. Just a ghost." Puff. A needle was inserted into Brother Jew's body, and the liquid inside was also injected. "You deserve to die." The other party held Brother Jew's head into his arms, as if whispering after him, "You really deserve to die for the 2 extra years I wasted, but I gave you a choice. The least painful way to die is to think of it as the final reward for what you have done so many years ago." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 495. Passengers, welcome to Sichuan Airlines, we look forward to seeing you again. Subai got off the plane. Chengdu was the city where he had lived the longest. He had a lot of memories here, maybe, but these memories would probably have to be enclosed in double quotation marks now. I got into a taxi at the airport. About half an hour later, the taxi stopped in front of a nursing home. After getting out of the car, Subai frowned slightly. For some reason, there was always an ominous premonition lingering in his heart. Regarding Ninth Brother, Subai's mentality is actually very complicated. In fact, Subai is a ruthless person, and also a very selfish and self-centered person. Otherwise, he would not have come here to see Ninth Brother for a year. This is actually the most true portrayal of Subai. You can make excuses for yourself, saying it's because Brother Ninth didn't regain consciousness anyway, and there's no difference between going and not going. But in fact, the reason why Brother Ninth became like this was because he helped Subai transport the bronze box, and Subai, the attitude of basically not asking anything after paying enough for the medical treatment is indeed a bit too realistic. After entering the door of the nursing home and registering his identity information, Subai found that the doctor at the registration desk looked a little strange, as if he was hesitant to speak. "What happened?" Subai asked. "Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Su, Mr. Ju passed away a while ago, and our nursing home has cremated and buried him. Because we couldn't contact you at that time, we couldn't inform you of this matter." The doctor apologized to Subai sincerely. "Ninth Brother died." Sudbai's eyes narrowed slightly at this time. If I remember correctly, I left several contact information in the family file, as well as the contact information of my friends. How could you find it at that time? Not to me. Even if I entered the story world at that time, it was impossible for me to not receive any information when I came back. However, this is indeed the case. I'm sorry, Mr. Su, but this is an oversight in our nursing home. We are willing to waive all the medical expenses Mr. Ju has spent in the nursing home for more than a year and give you all the medical expenses you paid before. Returning it to you is our sincerity. When a nursing home with a semi-official background suddenly becomes so considerate. Matter. It's definitely not that simple. Sudbai is not a homebody young man who has never left home. What ups and downs has he not seen in the past few years? Whether something is fishy or not will become clear after a little thought. Boom. The doctor in front of him was immediately grabbed by the neck and knocked upside down on the desk. Even if he didn't want to, Sudbai had to choose to be a medical troublemaker at this time. He didn't want any compensation, he just wanted to get the truth. He didn't want to play detective and business games with the people in these nursing homes during this time. No questions, no inquiries. He just keeps increasing the strength of his palms. At first, the doctor was still waiting for the security room to see what was happening on the camera and come over to subdue the thug, but who knew there was no movement at all. In fact, it's not the fault of the security room. If Sudbai doesn't have the ability to deal with the camera now, then the title of senior audience will really be in vain. The sound of bones being compressed began to be heard. Sudbai still looked at the doctor calmly. For Sudbai, killing an ordinary person was really not a big deal. Firstly, there were too many lice and he was not afraid of being bitten. Secondly, Sudbai looked at the doctor calmly. Even if the audience kills a few ordinary people on weekdays, the broadcaster will turn a blind eye. In this atmosphere, the doctor finally couldn't hold on any longer. He raised his hands and nodded repeatedly, obviously getting scared and ready to tell the truth. Sudbai let go and let him speak. He just died yesterday morning. He was murdered. The doctor said while rubbing his neck. Take me to see the body, Sudbai said. The body has not been disposed of. No, not yet. Our nursing home is doing this just to preserve its reputation. If word gets out that a customer in the nursing home has been murdered, this nursing home will really not be able to continue operating in the future. Please understand. Where is the body? Sudbai asked again, but this time his voice was louder. The doctor was startled and immediately nodded, follow me. Obviously, the doctor seemed to have noticed that Sudbai was not that interested in pursuing the nursing home's responsibility for compensation and even threatening to go to the media. In short, as long as Sudbai doesn't make trouble and doesn't publicize this matter, the nursing home will definitely try its best to meet Sudbai's requirements in other aspects. Brother Ju's body was placed in a small independent courtyard in the sanatorium. There were several electronic ice coffins here, but they were usually kept very tightly because it was necessary for the sanatorium to have a place similar to a morgue, but it was and it must not be seen or discovered by other customers in the nursing home. After all, they are here to recuperate, and they must not blatantly set up a morgue like a hospital. Sudbai stood in front of the ice coffin, stretched out his hand, and pressed the button. The ice coffin was slowly raised in front of him, and a stream of cold air flowed out of it. The doctor had disappeared, and an older administrative person followed Sudbai. There were several security guards at the door. Where is the wound? Sudbai asked. He didn't believe that this nursing home with many professional doctors would really not even examine the body of a murdered customer. They must be more concerned about people dying here than anyone else. It was injected into the chest area. The toxin has been extracted and tested. It is a relatively high-end neurotoxin, which can cause death very quickly, the old man said. Sudbai looked at Brother Ninth, closed his eyes slightly, and said solemnly, at least, Your death will not be painful. It's not painful. That kind of neurotoxin is very cost-effective when used to kill people, the old man interjected from the side. In the market, this is a sky-high price. The body will be kept with you for a while, is that okay? I will not publicize this matter, nor will I make it public, and I am too lazy to ask you for any compensation, but I hope that when I come back in a while, the body will no longer be there. Yes, this was a mistake on our part and we should take responsibility. Subai then walked out of the nursing home under the escort of several security guards. Not long after leaving the nursing home, the phone rang. It was Gong Zihai's call. Hello, Subai answered the phone. Hey, Subai, where are you? Are you not in Shanghai anymore? Gong Zihai asked on the other end of the phone. Well, I'm in Chengdu. How could you do this? Didn't we agree, you? I'll try to get back in time. After Subai finished speaking, he hung up the phone. Just after hanging up the phone, another call came, from Fatty. Hey, Dabai, things are serious, damn it. Fatty also came back, but instead of taking a plane back to Chengdu like Subai did, he first took the high-speed train to a city next to Chengdu, and then rented a car to go to his hometown, the entire Sichuan, which is also a large plain area in Chengdu. And the rest of the places are mainly mountainous areas, so in order to save time, Fatty also suffered a lot. Of course, according to Fatty's temperament, Fatty would definitely not be able to let go of the fact that Subai almost beat him to death in front of his house. But when Subai put the two photos in front of Fatty, Fatty was stunned for a moment, and then he sighed, patted Subai on the shoulder, and said, I couldn't fully understand your mental illness before. This time, I understand. Then, without saying a word, the fat man and Subai went two separate ways, traveling through the starry night to his hometown in Sichuan to help Subai find the bronze box that he had placed before. What's up? Subai was actually not very surprised. Ninth brother's death was obviously not accidental. People in the nursing home also said that the neurotoxin used to kill ninth brother was very expensive. It was so expensive to kill an unconscious person. The feeling of wasting everything. This also means that there is someone who has been standing in the dark all this time, watching and waiting for him. However, he should have known what he had discovered, so he immediately took action to destroy everything related to him. All connections and people are cut off. Therefore, Subai was really not surprised at all about what happened to the bronze box over the fat man's side. Damn, I originally placed the bronze box under the Buddha statue in a temple on the mountain and sealed it, but when I first went up the mountain, I found that the temple was very gloomy. After entering, I found that the only old man in the temple, the monk and a novice, had knelt down on the futon and passed away, and the bronze box was also gone. Can you tell the specific time? The time of death of the two monks, Subai asked. I estimate that it is at most what it was like half a day ago, less than a day, Fatty estimated as he observed the corpses of the two monks. Okay, Fatty, you drive from your hometown in the direction of Chengdu, and I'll drive from Chengdu in the direction of your hometown. No, Dabai, are you sure that that person will be intercepted by our luck? Fatty obviously didn't believe it. Maybe he has already returned to Chengdu and taken a plane to other places, or even went to the mountains casually. One drill. It's not that we go to him, but that he comes to us. Subai smiled slightly, but his eyes were filled with coldness. He came to us, the fat man obviously couldn't understand. He can't be. It is impossible to be willing to let a ghost chase you around, nor to be willing to hide behind the scenes all the time, like a stinking ditch rat who secretly kills people, takes a box, and then hides peacefully in the ditch. Because he feels that he is a human and I am a ghost, and therefore, he always has to be pretentious. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 496. In the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake, One of the most impressive things was the group of People's Liberation Army soldiers who parachuted directly into the disaster area without fear of death. They risked their lives and entered the disaster area as the vanguard. It looked very tragic, but in fact it exposed what emerged was the great instability of the traffic lines, and the real effective rescue forces and equipment were blocked from the outside. In recent years, the country has made great efforts to rechannel and rebuild the entire highway system in that area. Even when driving out of Chengdu and heading west, you can see the traces of old roads. Many of the original mountain roads were passed by winding roads. Nowadays, most of them are tunnels dug into the mountain. One after another, extremely deep and long tunnels run across there. It can indeed be seen from this that even nature, in some aspects, has to bow before human power. The car was driving on the mountain road. Even on the curves, Subai kept overtaking. Anyway, his own reaction speed was much faster than ordinary people, so he was not afraid. One hand was holding the steering wheel, and the other hand was still holding a cigarette. The window was not open, and the car was already a bit smoky, but Subai didn't care. "Don't let me down, really, don't let me down," Subai whispered to himself. Fatty was driving over here. About 2 hours later, Fatty and Subai used WeChat to locate each other's locations and determined to meet at a service station not far from both parties. Now, the situation is very clear. That person is either not there and has completely become a coward. If he wants to show a sense of presence, then he is most likely to show up at the service station. 10 minutes later, Subai drove into the service station. The service station was sandwiched by mountains on both sides. There was no vegetation on the mountains. They looked bare and there were obvious traces of mudslides. The fat man arrived here about 3 minutes after Subai. He looked for the license plate number and found Subai's car. When he opened the car door, the fat man hurriedly covered his mouth and backed away. "Damn, are you making elixirs in the car? It's full of smoke." Subai got out of the car and looked around with bloodshot eyes. There were many people and cars in the service station. Most of them came for convenience and then bought something to eat and drink before leaving, so there was a lot of traffic. "Looks like he's not here," the fat man said. "Have you eaten yet? Let's go get something to eat." Subai shook his head, and then, Subai's eyes were fixed on a publicity board in the service station. This publicity board was nothing more than a themed poster promoting national unity, but on the poster, red was used. A pattern drawn with chalk. The pattern is a child, and the child is carrying another child on his back. The fat man also followed Subai's gaze and his face immediately turned green. He spread his hands with chess pieces in his palms. "No need," Subai put his hand on the fat man's shoulder, "he shouldn't be trapped by your formation so easily. Or, you want to trap hundreds of people in this service station together." The fat man took a deep breath and said, "This guy actually dares to come. He's angry too." Subai smiled, but this smile looked very cold. Fatty knew that Subai had been suppressing the anger in his heart. Now Subai was really in a state of rage at any time. "Yo yo yo." In the distance, someone was shouting to the side. Subai followed the sound and looked over. It was someone who fainted for unknown reasons. "Fat man, you go over there and take a look, I'll go there." Subai pointed in the opposite direction, which was the bathroom in the service station. Yes, Subai immediately went to where the crowd was gathering, and Subai went straight to the bathroom. The bathroom is basically the most crowded place at the service station on the highway. When Subai walked in, there were already many people inside. There was some stagnant water on the ground, mixed with the fishy smell of urine. Subai frowned slightly and walked inside. At this time, Subai saw the same chalk drawing on the door of a squatting pit as on the previous poster. A child was carrying another child on his back. There were only a few cursory strokes, but the meaning was clearly expressed. It was obvious that the other party wanted Subai to get into this trap. Sudbai put his hand on the wooden board. Buzz. Click. First there was a trembling sound, and then all the wooden doors of the squatting pits in this row collapsed outwards. There were many people squatting inside to go to the toilet, and everyone was frightened by the scene in front of them. Sudbai's eyes swept over these white butts and buttocks. It should be that the person he was looking for was not there. It was impossible for the other person to really squat there to go to the toilet and let him see such a miserable scene. Sudbai didn't know whether he was a proud person with misophobia, but there was one thing that Sudbai knew very well. In front of him, the other person would definitely be extremely proud and have a misophobia that penetrated into his bones. Turning around, Sudbai walked out of the toilet. The door of the toilet was facing a bare mountain opposite. Sudbai remembered that he had been here before when he went to Josegu with the monk. According to the monk, this mountain range at this location is the vein of the dragon. The butt and buttocks are used for excretion, so they are bare and almost devoid of life. The location of the dragon's head is right in Josegu. At this time, against the sunlight, Sudbai could vaguely see a figure standing on the top of the mountain opposite. The person's facial features could not be clearly seen, and he could not even see what he was wearing, but he could confirm that it was a figure. Tourists will not go up there, but tourists from other places have an innate fear of landslides. No matter how desperate they are, they will never climb up there. Moreover, even if they are expert climbers, facing such a smooth and flat mountain wall and without professional equipment, it is impossible to go up to that place. Sudbai immediately started running towards the mountain. The fat man had just used the magician's method to wake up the man who had fainted due to being slightly high, and then he saw Sudbai rushing towards the hillside in front of him like a gust of wind. "Damn, Dabai, wait for me, be careful of falling into a trap," Fatty shouted. "Falling into a trap? Hee hee. Even if you fall into a trap. Even if it's an ambush. I want to go too. I'm going to tear him apart. I'll skin him alive. I'll eat him alive. Then, I will kill my so-called mother too. Immediately afterwards, I will kill my so-called father. Put their 3 bodies together. Let the wolves eat their bodies with me, and let the resentful spirits devour their souls with me. This kind of hate. Immortal. Endlessly." The windbreaker appeared on Sudbai's body when he was running, pulling Sudbai up directly. Coupled with Sudbai's rapid climbing with his hands on the rock wall, he almost went straight to the top in a straight line. However, when Sudbai stood on it, he saw clearly that the person in front of him was not a real person, but a simulated dummy, similar to the plastic mannequins in clothing stores in shopping malls, but much more realistic and delicate than plastic mannequins. Duo, wearing a black down jacket, stood there motionless. At the same time, there is something hanging on the back of the model. To be precise, it is a doll. The doll is a ghost image and is hung on the model's shoulder. Sudbai's 2 fists were clenched tightly at this moment. He took off the doll and placed it in front of him. It's myself. This doll. Just represent yourself. Sudbai took out the 2 photos from his pocket. At this moment, the fat man climbed up panting. He should have climbed up like this with the help of his flying sword and the fat man's excellent light kung fu ability. Quick! Whirring! The fat man gasped for air. When he looked at the model, he couldn't help but cursed, how come that guy acts like a bitch and only likes disgusting people? Then, Fatty found Sudbai looking at the 2 photos. Fatty has seen these 2 photos before. One photo is a family portrait. Inside were Sudbai's parents and Sudbai when he was a child. A little further away stood 9th brother, a housekeeper, and a maid. Simply put, 6 people. But there are actually 7 figures in this photo. It's not that there are passers-by A and B in the distance, but there is something behind Sudbai, or on his back to be precise, with half of his face exposed. That half of the face is cyan, with deep eye circles. Go down, this is not a human, but a ghost. And from this perspective, that ghost has actually been hanging on Sudbai's shoulder. While taking a family photo, this ghost also tremblingly, with a touch of envy, a touch of fear, and a touch of expectation, quietly revealed half of his face. He hopes he can also appear in this family photo. He hopes that he can also be a member of this family. If you can be included in the family portrait, you should be considered a family, right? This is what this ghost was thinking at the time. As for the second picture, it is also a family portrait, but in this picture, there are 6 figures instead of 7. Sudbai's parents stood together, but between Sudbai's parents, there was a bronze box. Sudbai's parents each held the bronze box in one hand, and ninth brother, the old housekeeper, and the maid stood on one side. However, based on this calculation, it seems that there are only 5 people. But wrong. In a position far away from the 5 people, in the lower right corner of the family portrait, you can see a little Sudbai. He is squatting and kneeling there, with a yellow talisman on his forehead. Obviously, he is not a member of the family portrait. In the eyes of Sudbai's parents, the one in the bronze box is truly a member of their family, and the little Sudbai kneeling in the corner with the talisman on his head and possessing the body of his son. No.